Are you ready to dive deep into meaningful discussions, explore personal stories, and gain practical insights that can transform your approach to mental fitness? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Real Talk Mental Fitness Podcast, where open conversation and authentic connections come together to empower your mental well-being. I'm your host, Chinazom.
And I'm your co-host, Ije.
And I'm so excited to have you here with us today. Might be too excited, actually, so I'm going to have to calm myself down. I'm going to calm myself down a little bit. All right, we're just... Ije, I'm just going to jump in with questions.
Absolutely.
So, Nick, there's so many topics we want to talk about. The first, so we want to touch on mental fitness under pressure.
Yeah.
I think your book really covers. Rewriting inherited limits. So I'm 49 this year. So when I read your book, it was like, yeah, the stories we tell ourselves and what our body's capable of. Yeah, it's so I definitely want to jump into that. And then IJ's top topics are the paradox of discipline and freedom.
Yeah.
Because she says she's not a runner, but like running those 50 miles is intense when the amount of discipline you have to do. And she wants to know where the freedom comes in.
Okay.
And then also sustaining high performance without losing yourself. Those are key topics. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Just some light little stuff.
Getting to know.
Well,
it's not every day we get to be in conversation with you, Nick. And really the journey that you describe is so incredible and something that so many people would imagine and want to do. But to actually have gone through that and to be sharing your story is really powerful. And so, yeah, we're going to use every opportunity to get your thoughts on a couple of things.
Great. All right. I'm game. I'm here.
Okay. So I'm going to jump with the first question, Nick, about challenging the narrative. And what was the story that you inherited about life and performance, and especially the decline after 40? And when did you realize it wasn't true?
I had a belief that you just get slower and slower as you get older, and that you can work like really hard. And if you do everything right, you can kind of slow the slowdown. Remember, there's this funny saying I remember once, I work in the media business, and I remember my boss once saying, decline is the new up. And
it's as good as it gets.
Yeah. And I kind of had that view about running. If I can just have like decline, that's as good as I can get. Right. And I was very proud of myself from my, mid 30s to age 43. I ran the New York Marathon pretty much every year. And pretty much every year I ran it, somewhere 243, 244, 245. And I kind of thought, okay, if I can just hold on to this, that's great. And that's as good as it can be. And then it was only when I was 43, 44, that I started training in a different way and started focusing in a different way. And suddenly I realized, well, wait a second, I can go much faster. And then I went, 238, 234, 229. And I, for non-marathoners, it's a whole world of difference. You go from 1,000th place to 100th place. You go from like the best person in your building to, I think I was ranked 3rd in the world in the marathon or something like that for my age. And it was a huge change. And a big part of it came from kind of allowing myself to believe that I didn't have to, that decline was not actually the new up. Up was the new up.
True. Yeah, I know it's when you said that about believing it, I had a similar story. So I'm just turned 49 and I have...
You're so young.
I know, but...
So much of life is ahead of you. I can tell you that from 50.
Yeah, but from 45, I started telling myself this story. I stopped running because I had about flat feet and my hips were like just clickety clacking. It was pain. It was hurting to sleep. And then all of a sudden last year, I found this exercise thing. It's called Body Lava. But she basically made you start to realize you can still be an athlete, just understanding your body and make sure you're moving in kind of primal movements.
Huh.
And this year I've been going to the gym with Ije. I'm lifting more than I was when I was 30.
Wow, really? That's amazing.
Yeah. I'm faster than I am. So it really hit me with like believing that story. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, as I started to do that, I'm like, hold on a minute. I'm actually, I can do things I couldn't do before. And it just, started to build from there.
Wow. That's That's cool. I mean, there is some reality. Like there are things that are harder. I was just noticing like my shoulder hurts. Why does my shoulder hurt? From like getting tackled by an 11-year-old playing snow football like 4 days ago. I don't think when I was 30, an 11-year-old tackling me would have led to 4 days of shoulder pain.
We talk about that all the time, how you don't quite recover as quickly as you used to. I mean, I know that we're saying up is the new up, but are you finding that even on the recovery, you have to approach it differently? And like, is it more mental than physical? Like, how's that landing for you?
There are a few specific physiological changes that I'm aware of. And if I compare myself to even 5 years ago, so recovery is one, just the amount of time it takes for small injuries to heal and to disappear. And, if I'm like running and I turn my ankle, right? The number of days, weeks, months that it takes for my ankle to feel better, much slower. I don't know exactly why that is. The amount of time it takes to get going, right? When I'm running, if I'm going to, go run a workout, or I'm even running to the office, like my general day as I run to the office, I run home from office, it's really slow to get going, right? The speed at which I can run a marathon or a 50-mile race isn't that much different from 5 years ago. It's a little bit slower, but the amount of time it takes to get going and the speed at which I run, like my easy runs on days where I'm a little tired, is much slower. And then my peak velocity, right? Sort of maximal power output, muscular strength, the amount of force you can put into the ground, that's going down dramatically. I mean, like there's an interesting contrast. So I have a 15-year-old son who likes to run, and we'll race together all the time. And when we're racing something short, like 100 meters, he's like 4 seconds ahead of me, which means he's like 30 meters ahead of me.
Oh, wow.
When we race a quarter mile, he's like 40 meters ahead of me. He's like, hasn't gained that much. When we race a mile, we're dead even. Anything longer than a mile, I crush him, right? Oh. And, I just don't have the fast twitch muscles. I don't have the power to put in the ground. I don't know if that's strength, but I've got, sort of a long-term endurance. And that squares with what we know about human physiology, which is if you train for a long period of time, there's sort of muscular adaptions, mitochondrial adaptions that allow you to kind of continue running for a long period of time. And I have the benefit of having trained at long distances now for 30 years that has changed my body to help it be better at that. I just can't move quickly.
So when it comes to limits, it's like decline is not the decline in decline, but we do have to admit that some things have changed.
You can't be delusional, right? I mean, like,
okay.
I definitely have, like, I've run faster. I've got really cool racing accomplishments in my like late 40s. But if I were to say today, like, you know what, I'm gonna be a pro ice hockey player, right? Like, it's not gonna happen, right? Or I'm gonna run a 60-second quarter mile, which is something I probably could have done when I was 15. Like, not a chance in the world, right? If I go under 70, that'd be great.
Okay, I love that. Don't be delusional, but
yeah. I mean, what I'm like, as you're describing that, I'm just hearing you kind of changing what you think of as good or success, right? In terms of your relationship with this sport that you love so much.
Yeah.
Was that a gradual thing, or can you pinpoint a moment when it became really clear to you and didn't feel like you were settling, right? Or like taking you know what I mean? A consolation prize of some sort.
Yeah, it was a pretty sudden process. So what happened is I meet these new coaches in the spring of 2018, and I had been, as I said, stuck running 2:43 marathons for a long time. And they asked me what the absolute best I thought I could do was. And I said, well, if everything were to break the perfect way, I could run under 2:40. But I kind of laughed when I told them that. But then they got me on a training program, and then they got me to run a 2:38. And that sort of changed my belief structure. So, well, if I can run 2:38, I can run 2:37. If I can run 2:37, I can run 2:36. And so then the next race I ran a 2:34. And then the next race I ran a 2:29. And at that point, I probably stretched into delusion because I was like, on the next one, I'm going to run 2:19. I'm going to qualify for the Olympic trials. And, I never actually tested that proposition because COVID hit. And I'm, training got all crossed up. But I think
it's not a delusion.
Well, I think the odds are pretty slim. My coach at that point, they sort of very, very artfully, like Obi-Wan Kenobi, like guided me to believe in myself and break through my old barriers. When I told him I wanted to run another one and wanted to go like 10 minutes faster, he was like, Nick, I think you need a break.
It's good. It's good to have a guide there, like Obi-Wan, to just be like,
right. There are ranges of things you can do, right? And there are things you can't do. And it's very important to get, it's very important to break through the barriers that are preventing you from seeing where you can go. And then it's very important to have someone to like rein you back in to make sure you understand that there is a real world and there are real limits. So
I'm thinking about that and wondering, would you have come close to that without those guides?
Well, so there's this really interesting reason, which I get into the book, for why I was so held back. And I didn't realize this, but I had run a 2:43 marathon when I was 30 years old. And it had been an incredible breakthrough after years of struggling in the marathon. And I felt so strong and I felt so alive, and when you try, one of the premises of the book is that running is, because of it's so simple, it's so elemental, you feel it in a different way, right? When you succeed, you feel like strong and vibrant in a way you don't when you like win a lacrosse game. If you win a lacrosse game, maybe the ref made a call, maybe your teammates are like, it's cool, it's great. Or when you win a soccer game, like I've won lots of soccer games. I love winning a soccer game, but it's different from setting a goal and meeting it when you run. Because when you run, it's just you and you're like your shorts and your singlet, and it's just you. So I had run that 2:43 when I was 30, and I felt amazing. And then right after, like literally like 3 or 4 days after, I'm diagnosed, or the doctor finds a lump in my throat. Hardest thing in my life, thyroid cancer. It takes a long time to get back. And I think what happened is that in my 30s, I never allowed myself to believe I could be faster than I had been at that moment when I'd felt so strong and so alive. And I ran that first 2:43. So there was this kind of like this thick block that was deep inside my head that was like, Nick, you can't go faster than this. Even though I clearly had all this natural talent, I have all this good luck in my genes. There are lots of reasons why I could have gone faster. And so I think I did need a coach, a guide, a guru to sort of help me get through that. The coach didn't know anything about the cancer. The coach didn't like understand that. He just looked at me, saw what I could do, talked to me about how I had trained, knew how fast I'd run in high school, and was like, this dude shouldn't be running 2:43. He should be going faster. Like, see if I can get him there.
Wow. And you listened? Because I know, oftentimes, like, especially with you had that great record and you'd been running for a long time.
Yeah.
When someone shows up in your life, even when they are experts, I mean, how did you build that trust?
It's a good question. I was quite skeptical at first. The initial approach came from Nike, and I was like, I'm like skeptical of large corporations. Probably not the best thing for someone who runs a magazine that relies on advertising with large corporations. But like, I'm skeptical of like the intentions of anybody who's very rich, right? And I was like, well, why are they doing this? Like, why are they approaching me? Is it, they want good coverage and Wired? Like, what's going on? And exactly are these people? And like, will this work? And will it work with me? I'm like such a busy guy. I was then the editor-in-chief of Wired. I had a lot to do. And so I was a little skeptical. And then I met them. And it was 3 guys, right? Steve Finley was like my regular coach. He lives in Brooklyn where I live. We start talking Joe Holder, who's this sort of, savant of like how the body moves, what you can do, nutrition. And then Brett Kirby, who is kind of this sort of like monkish, stick with Star Wars, like a little bit of like Yoda energy of just like, you talk to him once and you're like, oh man, like, this guy understands the universe, right? And so I met them and I immediately started to trust them because I could tell like they knew more than I did, right? I knew a lot, but they knew a lot more than I did. And, there was no BS to them. You didn't feel like there was, sometimes people know more than you, but they're selling you something and you feel like you're being manipulated. They just seem to really be curious about the world and be curious about like this experiment on me. And so I started to win the trust just from that. And then it worked. And I was running mile repeats on this track in Berkeley. And I was like, what's going on? Like, yeah, the year before I would go run 4 by a mile on a track, right? So you run a mile, you rest for 2 minutes, you run a mile, pretty typical workout. And I don't know, I'd run them at like 5:40. And I was like running them at 5:20. It's like, this is weird. Something's happening. And so then when that, like, again, because running is so clear, like, you have a great soccer coach, maybe you feel like you're getting better, but you can't really be sure. There's no like pure number that tells you whether you're getting better at soccer. There's a pure number in running. And so the trust was built. And then I started to believe them. And they could have told me to do anything and I would have done it. Anything related to running, right? Like they could have told me to run 140 miles a week. They could have told me that like the most important thing is to like go into freezing water and do the backwards butterfly. And I like would have done that. Like I just believed in whatever they said.
Yeah. Well, Nick, I wanted to shift a little bit to running as a strategic battleground for your mental fitness.
Yeah.
And when did running become not just about fitness, but actually a way to kind of keep hold of your sanity, survival, and just actually control of your destiny?
In some ways it happened when I was 15 years old. And so what happened there is I was at high school and I had gone to this elite competitive high school, Phillips Andover, and I wasn't particularly good at anything. I didn't really fit in, didn't have a girlfriend. Like I just wasn't like, I was a sophomore. High school's hard for most people. And it was kind of tricky for Nick. And I had been a basketball player. I was like, I'll make the varsity basketball team. And I didn't make the JV and I didn't make the JV2. So I was like a loser. And the only sport you could run was track. I joined the track team and then suddenly, wait, Nick's pretty good. And it started to give me self-confidence, right? It gave me self-confidence as like a guy covered in acne who's like not doing that great at the school. And I started to feel good about myself. And then what I also did is it sort of opened up. I mean, you were talking about like animal primal movements, right? And helping you lift more. It kind of opened up like an animal sense in my mind. Like I realized pretty early on that I didn't want to just like run around the track. I like to run around the track. I want to go run in the mountains, right? And I want to go like try to get from the bottom of the mountain and see if I could run all the way to the top of the mountain, right? And when I got there, it felt amazing, right? And I felt more alive. And when I had been a kid, I'd always loved like being outside and exploring. And my mom would just let me go when we were up in Maine, and I would just sort of like get lost in the woods on purpose and then try to find my way home. And running, I think, kind of opened that up for me. So it became like a mental escape. I wasn't sophisticated about it enough then to know that it could be a form of meditation and to really realize what it was doing to my mental health. But I started to get the benefits from it there. And then, I ran through high school. I did well. I ran to college, did not do well. And I think then it was probably in my 30s, after I recovered from my sickness, that I started to use it as a practice of like a daily practice, a daily stoic, a form of meditation where, every day you go out and run. And it wasn't just about accumulating fitness. It wasn't about the social camaraderie of the sport. It was about, this is a time where I'm going to like think through things. This is a time where I'm going to let my mind run free. This is a time where I'm going to like listen. This is a time when I'm going to like just look at what's going on the road, or I was going to like smell the city, right? I'm going to like open up my senses, open up my mind. And that started to happen in my early 30s.
Wow. I mean, I'm kind of speechless because I'm not a runner, but you have me excited to go out there.
You got to go out there.
Do you know what I mean? Like there's an energy that you have as you describe it, and it's so visual. And as you were just describing that, I felt I was out in the city, like taking and tomorrow he's going to see me out there just.
Yeah, there's something I wanted to share, like running as well for me. I was a lot bigger when I was in college, really overweight. And just in my third year, so my roommate, he was into running and going to the gym. And I went on this run with him one time. It was late at night. And we got to this bike path. By this point, I'm dying, coughing. And he said to me, he goes, just get to the top of the bike path. Yeah. For some reason, I believed him, and I did. And that kind of changed my life. And it was just running. It's like, it was so painful, but I thought I have to get to the top. And then I lost like 3 or 4 stone. And ever since then, all through my life, I always ran. I did marathons, and I always ran like 10K. Yeah. But I didn't realize that was what was keeping my mental health going. Because it was like, no matter how bad things were at work, if I just got up and I went for the run, somehow I'll come back and be like, okay, you can get through today. You can, somehow.
Remember that moment, right? And you still remember that moment where,
till
Yeah.
today. Yeah. And it's something magical about running. I don't know. It just gives you this, just get outside, just put one foot in front of the other. And somehow after all the thoughts go round and round, you do feel better. Maybe it's just the endorphins, but there's just something that.
I don't think it's the endorphins. I mean, maybe they play some role in it. I do think it's got something to do with the loneliness. It's got something to do with the fact that it's just you, right? Like you got where you wanted to get. You got up the bike path, right? Nobody else got you there, right? There wasn't like, it wasn't like a teammate carried you there. It wasn't like you got there because, you had some extra, like, I don't know, you had a better, you hit it 200 yards, but you had a better golf club. No, it was just you, it was your feet, right? And so you feel different about it.
Yeah, you're right. I think it's also the self-talk. Like, I remember like doing a marathon the first time when you're getting to that end where your body's telling you to shut down.
Yeah.
And somehow as you keep talking, I remember just all of a sudden I could see the negative thoughts there. And I was like, okay, no, we don't need to do that. And there's something about the self-talk where all of a sudden you realize that you're actually in charge of the story yourself. You can just keep pushing.
It's, the negative thoughts are so amazing, right? So I've been doing this sport for 30 years and I honestly don't think I've ever done a workout or a race where I haven't had like the little demon that's like, time to quit, right? Not once, right? Like I have yet to, I'd like to enter some kind of Buddhist state where it's not there. And what's so interesting about that is that I know it will come in every workout. And so both I can prepare for it coming, and also I know that if I give into it on a workout on Monday, I'll be more likely to give into a workout on Wednesday. And so one of the things I try really hard to do is, I don't know, like yesterday morning, I was doing a pretty basic workout where I would run hard for a minute, rest for a minute, run hard for 2 minutes, rest for a minute, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. And, it gets to the 4-minute one. It's like a little bit harder. I'm like, And then I was like, you know what? It's just 4 minutes. And if you give in here, right, not only will you lose the tiny benefits of this workout, but it'll make it easier to quit the next time. And so that's something I think about a lot.
You actually talk to yourself while you're running, or is this more like when you're doing those sort of longer runs? Are you in dialogue with yourself, or is it just like silence? Or share a little bit about what's happening in your mind.
Yeah. So there's lots of things that are going on. I'm occasionally literally in dialogue. I will occasionally like say something out loud, right? Like, this is only 4 minutes, stay calm, right? I will very often, I have a set of motions that I do. Like one of the things in running you have to be very careful of is going too hard, too fast, getting too excited, particularly in a race where they're like other people and like, that person shouldn't be ahead of me, I should be up with them. Or gosh, the people they're yelling, or, I plan to run this at 5:45, but I don't know, maybe 5:40, right? And then I will often there's this thing I do where I like breathe into my nose, out through my mouth, push my hands down, and like it helps me calm, right? So sometimes I'm doing that. Sometimes I'm often I have like a mantra. So a lot of runners have this. I only started doing it maybe 5-10 years ago, but where you have like a thing you repeat. It doesn't have to be verbalized. It can just be inside your head that you repeat over and over to kind of keep you on track. And so mine is right, 2, 3, left, 2, 3, right, 2, 3, left, 2, 3. And it's like, it makes me focus on my feet hitting the ground, and it makes me focus on my right foot hitting and my left foot hitting. If I did like 1, 2, 1, 2, I'd always be focused on my right foot. And I care a lot about balance and being centered when I run. And so I alternate. And so if I'm struggling in a workout, or I'm like, my mind is drifting, I'll try to lock in on that. And so I do that when I'm running a race often. Sometimes I'm just trying to clear my mind. And then sometimes, you're just thinking about whatever the hell you're thinking about, right? Like, God, I can't believe like the Celtics lost to the Hawks last night, right? Like whatever like stupid stuff's in your mind, cycles through as well.
That's so amazing. Wow.
So I had a question, Nick, because you're constantly pushing yourself and you push the limit, high performance. And what's the self-talk sometimes? I don't know if you get this, where when you get to the limit, to know whether it's safe to push or whether to hold back?
Yeah, that's a great question, because there are a bunch of limits. there's an actual physical injury limit, right? And so that's like sometimes when I'm running, and this happens particularly if I'm like trying to sprint or it's, yesterday, in fact, when I was doing the 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, 4 minute, and the 1 minute ones where I'm going a little bit faster, I can kind of feel my hamstring, right? I have an old hamstring injury. And so, and I know that if I go like too fast, I'm going to aggravate it. So there's like that physical, right? Then there's another limit, which is like, are you pushing yourself to the point where like when you're running a workout, you kind of want to go at like 95% effort is better than both 94 and 96, right? Because if you go to 96, you'll sort of be too tired the next day and you won't be able to do the next one in 2 days, right? Because you have to kind of like keep at a cadence where you push really hard, but you can then push hard again the day after tomorrow. And so getting to know, and I don't know whether maximal effort is a subjective thing, so I'm just going to use the 95. But you also don't want to slow down at 94, right? Because then you're not getting the real benefits. And so what I try to do is I'm both monitoring data signals, right? I have a plan for the workout. This is the pace I'm going to run. This is the heart rate I'm going to run. So I'm monitoring those data signals. But then there's also the signal of how you feel. And so I'm trying to like analyze how I'm feeling. And then I'm looking at like, tomorrow I'm doing 3 by a mile and a half. I have a pace goal, I have a heart rate goal. And I'm also going to know in the second one, if the second one is slower than the first one, then I screwed up, right? Then I like went too hard in the first one and I'm not going to get as much benefit. So you're also comparing each interval to the one before. But this is the crux of training. And I think we went back to those coaches from Nike. Part of what they did is they had such a good sense of like where the exact right line was. And I was sending them all my data. I was sending them all updates for my workouts. They would know that like they should tell me to run 5:25 pace. You're going to run 4 by a mile. First one's going to be 5:30. Next one's going to be 5:25. Next one's going to be 5:20. Next one's going to be 5:15. They would know exactly where to put those workout metrics so that I would be at the right line. And then I would follow it precisely because I trusted them. And that made it a little bit easier to sort of titrate properly. But you're still really thinking through whether you're going too hard or whether you're not going hard enough.
It's nice having those experts where you know where that red line is. But I can imagine not just in running, in life, we're always pushing to that red line. And I know like that my voice, my self-talk has changed as I've gotten older to kind of like, okay, is this the red line? Is this 96 or is this 94?
Yeah.
Has that changed for you? Not just in running, also in other parts of your life?
Definitely. Right. As you get older, you learn all this wisdom, right? You learn what you can do. You learn what it feels like. You have much more awareness of your body. I was having this conversation with my son. My son is 15. And he's like, Dad, you never get injured. I was like, it's true. He's like, why don't you get injured? Like, why don't I inherit those genetics? I was like, dude, it's not genetics. Like, you have my genetics, right? You look just like me, you're same size, same height, same weight, it's awareness. And I was like, you push yourself so hard. And I was like, you're not, you're just going to have to develop, you're going to understand these limits of when you start to get hurt and when you don't get hurt. And it's definitely something where I've kind of learned what 95% is. I've kind of learned how many workouts I can do. Now, what's so interesting about running, and part of how I'm challenging myself now, is that I'm also going into the unknown. Like, I know how I should feel at 4 by a mile. I don't know. I just ran a 100K race, the last race I did. I have no idea, right? Because I've only done that distance twice. My next goal is a 50K race, right? So how should I feel in that race, right? I've run 50K race once before. I don't really know. I've run 30 marathons and they're close to that, but you don't really know. And there's certain kinds of training, and I'm doing different workouts than I did before. Sometimes you don't know how you should feel because you haven't done it before.
I'm picking up that there's a trust that you have, or almost a sensitivity that you have with your body in the race to know, is this a good feeling or is not? When should I pull off? Especially in the 100K race. Am I landing the mark on that?
You are. And so the 100K race, I think that maybe the most interesting story was from the first time I ran it. And this was summer of 2024. And I run a couple 50-mile races. So 100K is not that much further, except this was 100K in the mountains. And so when I run 50 miles on a flat road, it'll take me a little under 6 hours. When you run 100K in the mountains, I knew it was going to take me like 12 hours, right? So it's very different. It's twice as long, even though it's only 12 miles longer. And I remember that race I remember this thing very vividly. I started out and I wasn't really prepared for it. I had only gotten into the race like 2 weeks before. So I wasn't fully prepared, and I was running. And I remember I got so stressed, like halfway through. I was like tracking my heart rate, and I was tracking my pace and checking what place I was in and trying to make sure that I ate exactly how I planned it. Like, okay, this is the number of carbohydrates you're taking each hour. And I was like, there were so many I was running it the way I run a marathon, which is you try to optimize all these different variables. And I remember looking at my watch and I was like, God, I've run longer than I've ever run in my life. And I have 30 miles to go.
That's disheartening. Yeah. Scary.
Yeah. And so then it's like the best thing that's ever happened to me in running. Because I've been working on this book, I'd met all these amazing people. And one of them had said, when you're trying to do something that seems impossible, you have to just forget about how hard it is, right? Just imagine that you're a child running in the woods. And so then I was like, you know what? And so I like literally took my heart rate monitor off and I changed my watch. I was like, no longer show me how fast I'm running. Just don't. I don't want to know how far I've gone. I don't want to know how fast I'm going. I just put it to the time of day, right? It is now like 11:30 in the morning. And then I just started to try to imagine, it's not that simple, but try to imagine that I was a kid back in Maine and I'm just like running through the woods. And then the miles just started to fly by, right? And like, not only that, I went from like, I was probably in 25th place. I finished the race in 8th place. So I pass all these people. I feel amazing. And the race, or I guess it was like, I remember going to the last aid station. I was like, how far to go? And they were like, 5 miles. I was like, oh no, only 5. Like, I want more. And it was an incredible experience. Now that's not always the case. The next year, I ran the same race and like tried to imagine I was a child running in the woods. It was going great. And then I like stubbed my toe, my toenail split off. And I was like, gosh, I would really like this race to be a couple miles shorter than it is. You wouldn't mind? Like, let's move the finish line closer.
Yikes. Oh. Yeah. So even with, it seemed like you had a foolproof plan in terms of imagining yourself as a young child running through the woods. But I guess it's not always.
It's not, I don't like, I would have to be there are definitely runners who reach a kind of a deeper spiritual level than I have. I'm definitely at like a deeper spiritual level than I was when I was 30 or 40. But part of what I was trying to do in the book is to reach runners who have gotten to places that are more profound than I have. So the woman who taught me that was this woman, Super Babek-Jord, and she had a similar running experience. First time she runs, she like tries to run lampposts. I'm going to run 1 lamppost. I'm going to run 2. And then she starts running. She runs a marathon in the freezing cold in Vermont. She loves it. And then she enters these crazy races where you race for 6 days straight. And then she runs, this race where you run 3,100 miles around the same block in Queens. And so it's like 6,000 times around the block in Queens, right? It's right on the Grand Central Parkway by Jamaica High School. You're not running where I ran my 100K up in the Finger Lakes. You're running like, running in Queens. And, she did it and she won it 9 years in a row. And the spiritual level she must have gotten to allow herself to just go around the block without going crazy for 6 weeks, 8 weeks on end is something else.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow, that is incredible. Speaking of spiritual level, I mean, I do have to ask this question because with all the training that you just described, and I think I remember Chinazom, you'd mentioned like there was like a 7-year duration where you were like all in working on improving your skill. That seems like it's all consuming.
No, it's not. I mean, like, I try very hard to make it minimally consuming, right? I have 3 kids. Like, I play with the kids all the time, right? I have this crazy job. I'm running this big magazine. I try very hard to I try to have running be additive to the rest of my life. this is partly why I've been able to do it so long, right? I do make sure that there are boundaries around it. I pay attention to it. I mean, this is the great thing about running. You actually can't spend that much time doing it. If you spend 3 hours a day doing it, you will get hurt. Like no one in the history of mankind has been consistently able to run more than like 130 miles a week without their bones breaking. And so there are like some physical limits. And so I both am bounded by that. I've never even gotten close to that level. And then I work really hard to make sure that it never goes outside of that bounds, because it can't be the most important thing in my life. It can't even be the second most important thing. It can't even be the third most important thing. It has to be lower down the list, right? Work, family has to be important. Work has to be more important. Like there's stuff that has to be more important. And so I think part of the reason why I have such a positive and long relationship to the sport is that I've never let it dominate my life.
Wow.
I
didn't expect that.
I love that it's additive. It actually helps you with all the things that matter the most, your kids and your family. And
yeah. And my wife might have some quibbles with that. I mean, I think that she...
we might need a second.
I need a second episode with her on. Let's get her.
If you had an off-the-record interview with her, if she was on and she was like being recorded, she'd be like, "Oh yeah, I think it's very good for Nick. I'm glad he does it." This totally private conversation. She might say, like, "I kind of wish sometimes he'd stop."
That's probably the truth.
But my kids think it's cool. Like they think it's great that their dad, sets records and wins races, and they just want me to like only train while they sleep, which is what I try to do.
Oh, really? They gave you those stipulations and you keep to it?
I try. I mean, you can't totally, but like, I don't know. I ran longest run I did this week. I went out 5:30 in the morning on Saturday or Sunday. A lot of times I'll take them to soccer practice. I'll drop them at soccer practice, and then I'll run while they're practicing. I'll run around the track and watch them, or I'll just go run around the park and, pick them up, drive them home. So, it's invisible. You do the parenting, you have the good conversation while you're in the car, and then you do the workout, and it kind of works for everybody.
Wow, that's cool. So, Nick, there's a question I wanted to ask about the book.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful book and also very vulnerable.
Yeah.
The things that you share. Why now? What was the driver and why you brought it out now?
Well, I've been thinking about it for a while. I started thinking about, I guess there were a couple of things that were the impetus for it. So one was when I had that realization that I had been stuck at running 243 marathons because of the way I had thought of myself and my sickness. That was like a pretty interesting revelation, right? And it wasn't just an interesting revelation about Nick, it was an interesting revelation about runners in general. And that seemed important, and that seemed worth writing about. And then there's my father, who died in 2017, shortly before this happened, before I started getting fast. And he had taught me about running. He had led this, remarkable, crazy life. And his story was worth writing about. So I had those two elements. I had my story, I had my father's story. And then I was thinking about some of the other runners I'd met and some of the things I'd learned from them. And so I thought, well, maybe I could do this. Maybe I can like piece these three threads together, like stories of other runners, my story, my father's story, and do it in a way where it is both a memoir. It does cover a lot of my life, but it's not a memoir, right? Like I worked at the New Yorker for 6 years. People who work at the New Yorker 6 years can write 300-page books about their time at the New Yorker, right? The New Yorker is amazing. And there's like 500 words, maybe 300 words about the New Yorker in my book. Like there's nothing. So it wasn't like a memoir of my career. It was just a memoir of my running, like a narrow aspect of my life. And so I started thinking about whether I could do this. And so it was during COVID, and I was still the editor of Wired. I guess there's one other factor. I wrote an article about my father and running, and it ran in Wired. And it wasn't the most read piece I'd ever written. Like I'd written a piece a few months before that had like, let's say 3 million readers. And this one had like 500,000. So a lot of readers. The number of emails I got and the number of messages from people who said that it had kind of awakened them to something inside of them or helped them think more deeply about things was extraordinary. I was like, well, given this response, I should probably write a book. So that's where it started. And then it took a long time to write because it was day job.
A big one at that, yes. At an unprecedented time as well.
Yeah, it's been wild. I mean, running the Atlantic, it's pretty important. Like you don't want to be the guy who screwed up the publication that Ralph Waldo Emerson started.
That's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
And then my next question is, the book's out.
Yeah.
Where you were before you wrote it, where are you now? How do you feel?
How do I feel about the book, or how do I feel about the sport?
How do you feel about the book and you personally? Because you had these intentions, like
Yeah.
now that it's out in the world, how do you feel now about it?
It could not have gone any better. Like the number of, I still get emails every day from people who feel like the book helped them, reconsider their father or forgive their parents. People who, literally have used the book as a training guide and have gotten faster. People who now understand their spouse's obsession. I get these just amazing handwritten letters, and these, like, I just got a note from someone yesterday who's like, my God, Nick, I listened to the book on audio. The second I finished it, I started it again. They listened to, like, the book's, I don't know, it's a lot of audio listening, to listen to it twice. Somebody just told me they read it 3 times. It's been out for like 3 months. So all these people who are writing these great notes, it just makes you feel like, I wrote something that resonates. So that makes me feel good.
That's phenomenal.
Now, it's also the case that I'm like running way slower.
You are?
I ran the New York City Marathon in November. The book came out. I've timed the book to come out the week before the marathon. And so there's like a lot of eyes on me. Like, book has come out. I do this event at the expo. I did like 30 podcasts in advance. So there's all these big podcasts. There's a CBS Sunday segment. A lot of people paying attention to how Nick runs the New York City Marathon, and I suck. So,
How did the impact of the book?
I think I was tired. I was sick. You go and you travel everywhere, and I just was worn out. My resting heart rate was like 15 beats per minute faster than it's supposed to be. And so I ran the marathon, and I missed my goal by like 30 minutes. Like usually I'm sort of within 30 seconds. So, there's been some trade-offs.
Yeah. Like with everything that's great in life, right?
Yeah.
And I know we're almost at time here, but I do have one thing I want to ask about. You started off this journey writing this book. You had some clear objectives and some intentions.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about some unanticipated impacts, with that race you had afterwards. But if there was one thing that you've become aware of now, what is that?
That I become aware since the release of the book?
Yeah, or since embarking on this journey that wasn't, obvious to you at the start.
I've forgiven my father more. And we didn't really talk too much about him, but he's this deeply complicated guy who was very loving to me throughout my life. But, by the time it's the end of his life, he's kind of running a brothel for men in Bali. Like, there's a scene I describe in the book where he's like calling male prostitutes to my house while I have little kids. Like, he's bankrupt and I'm supporting him. He threatens to kill himself because he's mad at me and basically blackmails me to pay off another prostitute. There's a lot of like complicated stuff in the book, and we were always close, and I loved him dearly. And I, wrote about him right when he died. But when I worked on the book, I went much deeper to my grandfather's life, his father's life. I read his old sermons. He was a minister. I read about his life. I read more about my ancestors, who are these kind of like ragged Western pioneers. One's like a porter on the Lewis and Clark Trail. They're like sheriffs out in Elko, and Teamsters, and these like really interesting characters. I learned more about where my dad had come from. I read the letters that he wrote to me when I was young, which were piercingly intelligent and observant. I read his diaries, and I think I got a much deeper understanding of him after he died. So that was what changed the most in the reporting and the research.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that with us. What an honor.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me on. You guys do amazing work. I love talking to you. So this is great.
This was awesome.
Yeah, this was awesome.